She told the Werewolf King, who gave her refuge, "I'm not worth much, but I can cook." The forest was quiet, but not peaceful. Shadows stretched between twisted trees like long, dark fingers, and the wind whispered secrets through the branches. Alara ran, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. She had been running for days through woods and hills, away from a kingdom that would not forgive her mistakes. The sky was a dull gray, and the clouds hid the sun, making the world look cold and unwelcoming. She felt small and fragile among the tall, looming trees, but she did not dare stop. Her stomach growled, a harsh reminder of her weakness. She had eaten very little since she left, carrying only a small satchel with a loaf of stale bread and a few scraps of dried meat. Her hands shook as she held it, afraid to let go, afraid she might not survive if she did. Still, she ran. Then she saw it, a faint glow ahead, soft and golden, cutting through the gloom. Relief and fear collided in her chest. Relief, because it meant someone might be nearby. Fear, because humans rarely welcomed strangers who had nothing and were running from danger. The glow grew brighter as she approached a clearing. There, standing amid the mist, was a fortress unlike any she had ever seen. Its walls were tall, made of black stone that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Towers pierced the sky, and smoke curled from chimneys like silver snakes. The gates were open, though guarded by two massive wolves with eyes that shone like molten gold. Alara's heart nearly stopped. She had heard stories of the Werewolf King, a ruler of the forest, feared and respected by both humans and supernatural creatures. They said he was cruel and merciless, that he ate those who dared trespass in his domain. And yet, there was something in the fortress, in the soft glow spilling from its windows, that seemed almost welcoming. She stepped forward, her feet trembling, and spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, I mean no harm. I am just hungry." "I have nowhere else to go." The wolves growled low in their throats, but did not move to attack. Then a shadow detached itself from the gate. Tall, broad-shouldered, and silent, the figure approached. His eyes were sharp, like the forest itself had taken human form. His hair was dark as night, falling around his face in waves, and his presence felt like a storm held back by a thin line of calm. "I am Kalen," the man said. His voice was deep and slow, commanding without shouting. "Why are you here, girl?"
Alara swallowed hard. She bowed slightly.
I am alone. I have nowhere to stay." "I can cook. That is all I can offer." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Cooking?" "That is your value?" She shook her head, embarrassed. I'm not worth much else, but I can cook. I can feed people. I can serve." He studied her for a long time, as if trying to read every fear and secret written on her face. Finally, he said nothing. He simply turned and gestured toward the fortress. "Come inside. But stay where I can see you." Relief and fear surged together in Alara's chest. She hurried inside, keeping her eyes down. The walls were warm inside, lit by firelight that danced across the stone. The air smelled of herbs, smoke, and something wild that she could not name. She saw other people moving quietly through the hallways, wolves who could take human form, servants and guards, and all of them looked at her with caution, some with curiosity, none with immediate hostility. Kalen led her to a small room near the kitchens. It was plain, with a bed, a wooden table, and a small stove. "This will be your space," he said. "Eat something first. Then we will see what you can do." Alara nodded, her hands trembling as she placed her satchel on the floor. She sat by the small table and unpacked the bread and meat. It was not much, but it was enough to stop the pangs of hunger gnawing at her. She ate quickly, trying not to make a sound, but the warmth of the room began to soothe her shaking body. Later, she explored the kitchen. It was larger than any kitchen she had ever seen, filled with pots and pans, spices, and the smells of meals being prepared. A woman with hair as white as snow and eyes kind and sharp smiled at her.
"You must be new," the woman said.
"Kalen doesn't allow just anyone here. You must have a reason."
"I only want to help," Alara replied softly. "I can cook. I am not much else. Cooking is more than you think. Here, feeding someone is a gift. But be careful. Kalen watches more than you notice. He is not like other kings."
Alara nodded.
Her stomach twisting with unease and curiosity. She worked quietly, preparing a simple meal for herself. But she could not ignore the feeling that someone was always watching. Sometimes, in the corner of her eye, she thought she saw Kalen standing in the shadows, tall and silent, his expression unreadable. Days passed. Alara cooked for the pack, slowly learning their routines and preferences. She noticed Kalen more and more, the way his eyes seemed to follow her when she moved, the way he spoke softly to the wolves as if they were children, the way he sometimes disappeared for hours without explanation. She feared him, yes, but she also felt drawn to him. There was a weight in his presence, a mix of danger and something almost tender buried under the darkness. She did not understand it, and she was afraid to. One night, she was washing dishes when she heard a howl from the forest. It was not one of the wolves in the fortress. This howl was desperate, angry, and human-like in its pain. The windows rattled with the sound, and the fire in the hearth flickered as if startled. Kalen appeared beside her, silent and looming. He did not speak but gestured for her to follow. Outside, the forest was silver in the moonlight. Snow had begun to fall lightly, and the world looked quiet again, but the echo of the howl lingered. "Stay close," Kalen said. His voice was calm, but there was a tension under it, like a bow drawn tight. Alara nodded, gripping the edge of her cloak. She could see him shift slightly, the muscles in his back rippling in ways that were both frightening and beautiful. A wolf's snarl escaped his lips for a moment before he stood tall, human again, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Then they ran. Kalen led her through the forest with a speed and grace that made her breathless. The howl grew louder, closer. And then suddenly a figure leapt from the shadows. A human man, armed and dangerous, with eyes that burned with hate. Kalen moved first. His hand shot out, grabbing the man, lifting him easily off the ground. Alara stumbled back, afraid, but also captivated. She had never seen anyone move with such strength, such precision, such control. "Stay behind me," Kalen said, his eyes never leaving the attacker. His voice was low and commanding, like thunder held in a cup. The man struggled, but Kalen's grip was unbreakable. Then, with a fluid motion, Kalen's form blurred for a second, shifting, growing taller, more powerful. His hands became claws, and his teeth gleamed faintly in the moonlight. The man screamed, falling to his knees in terror, and then fled, leaving only the echo of his panic in the forest. Alara gasped. Her hands shook. You're a wolf," she whispered. Kalen's eyes softened for the briefest moment before he became human again. He exhaled slowly. "I am the king," he said. "This forest is mine, and I protect those within it." "You are safe." Alara nodded, her heart pounding. She had thought she was running from danger, but now she realized that danger had found her anyway. And yet, she felt something else, a spark of hope, a strange, frightening trust that she could not explain. As they walked back to the fortress, the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light across the snow. Alara shivered, not from the cold, but from the intensity of the night, from the power she had witnessed, from the man who had saved her.
"Why did you save me?" she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer.
Kalen's eyes met hers, unreadable and deep.
"Because," he said, "even someone who thinks they are worth nothing can hold a place in this world.
You have survived until now. That is enough. Elora looked down, her cheeks burning, her mind racing. She had never been told she was enough, not by anyone. Not ever. The fortress doors closed behind them, and the firelight inside seemed warmer than ever. But Elora could not forget the howl in the forest, nor the danger that still lingered outside. She had found sanctuary, yes, but the world beyond the walls was far from safe. And even within the walls, Kaelin was a mystery, a shadow she could not fully understand. She sat by the hearth that night, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea, and thought about what he had said. She was not worth much, but perhaps, just perhaps, she could belong somewhere. And somewhere in the fortress, Kaelin watched from the shadows, thinking the same thing about her, and feeling emotions he had not allowed himself in centuries. The forest outside whispered and waited, and the night held secrets that neither of them were ready to face. Winter had settled over the forest, and the fortress stood silent and cold beneath the pale sun. Snow lay thick on the ground, muffling the sounds of the world outside. But inside, life continued in quiet, steady rhythm. Elora moved through the halls carrying trays of food to the pack. Her hands were steady now, her nerves calmer than the first night she arrived. Yet a strange tension lingered whenever Kaelin entered the room. He was not often seen outside the evenings. During the day he would vanish into the fortress, walking the halls in silence, speaking to no one. The pack respected him deeply, and even those who were not wolves treated his words as law. And yet, when he appeared in the kitchens or in the hallways, Elora's heart would skip a beat. There was something about him, the weight of his gaze, the quiet strength, the faint sadness behind his sharp eyes that made her feel both safe and exposed. Elora had learned quickly that survival in this place depended not just on skill, but on observing the quiet patterns of the fortress. She learned which corridors were warm, where the fires burned brightest, which wolf preferred what food. In return, she was allowed freedom in the kitchens, a place where she could move without fear, a place where her cooking mattered. One morning, Kaelin appeared while she was kneading dough. The sunlight from the windows caught the sharp angles of his face, and he stood in silence, watching her hands move. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should speak. "You prepare well," he said finally. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of command. "Not many can calm the pack with food. You have done more than survive here." I try," she said softly, feeling awkward under his attention. "I want to help." Kaelin nodded once, as if he had expected no less. Then he turned and left, leaving her with a strange fluttering feeling she could not name. She shook her head, returning to her work, but the image of his face lingered like a shadow in the sunlight. That evening the fortress was quieter than usual. Snow had begun to fall harder, and the wolves moved inside, curling near the fires. Elora prepared a simple meal of stew and bread, her thoughts wandering to Kaelin. She tried not to think too much, but her curiosity was stronger than her caution. She wanted to know him, to understand the man behind the dark eyes and powerful presence. Kaelin entered the dining hall without knocking, his form tall and commanding. The room went silent at his arrival, the wolves straightening, the servants pausing in their work. Elora felt her hands tremble slightly as she carried a tray toward him. He did not take the food immediately. Instead, he watched her, eyes thoughtful. "Tell me," he said. "Why do you continue? You could run."
"You could leave. Why stay in this place that is dangerous, even for you?"
She looked down at her hands. I have nowhere else, and
I want to belong somewhere, even if it is just here with people who
need me.
Even if it is not much, I can do this.
I can feed them. I can help. Kaelin studied her, his expression softening for a fleeting moment. "You are brave," he said quietly. "More than you realize." She looked up, startled. "Brave? Yes," he said, standing taller. "You have survived in a world that would have destroyed you, and yet you offer kindness to those who might not deserve it. That is bravery."
Alara felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and embarrassment. No one had ever spoken to her this way, recognized her small acts as something more than simple survival.
Days passed, and their interactions became subtle rituals. Kaelin would watch from the shadows while she worked, offering occasional guidance or quiet praise. Alara began to notice his habits, the way he ran his hand along the back of a chair before sitting, the way he sometimes muttered to himself when deep in thought. She discovered that he did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried weight. Even a single sentence could make her pause and reconsider everything she thought she knew. One evening, the fortress was filled with an unusual tension. The wolves were restless, growling low in their throats and pacing near the walls. Alara sensed danger before she saw it. A cold wind whispered through the cracks in the stone, and the flames in the hearth flickered as if disturbed. Kaelin appeared without warning, his eyes scanning the room. "Outside," he said, his voice a command that brooked no argument. He extended his hand. "Come with me." Alara hesitated for only a moment before following. He led her through the halls and out into the snow-covered courtyard. The wind was biting, but she did not feel cold, her attention fixed entirely on him. "They are coming," Kaelin said, his eyes narrowing. "A pack of hunters, not wolves like mine. Humans who think they can take what does not belong to them." Alara shivered, not from the cold, but from fear. "What can we do?" she asked. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "We defend you. Stay behind me." She nodded, gripping her cloak. She had seen his power once before, but she still did not understand its limits. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, and then the hunters appeared, shadowy figures moving quickly through the trees, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. Kaelin moved first, fluid and precise. He did not hesitate. One moment he was human, the next he shifted, muscles rippling, claws gleaming faintly. The hunters faltered at the sight of him, their courage breaking. He did not strike to kill, but to warn, to dominate the moment with power. Alara watched in awe and fear, her heart pounding. She realized then how different he was from anyone she had ever known. He was terrifying, yet there was something protective in his strength, a fierce loyalty she could feel even from a distance. After the hunters retreated, Kaelin returned to human form, standing tall and silent in the courtyard. Snow had begun to fall again, covering the ground in a soft white blanket. Alara approached him cautiously. You
protected me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Why?" Kaelin's eyes met hers, dark and unreadable.
"Because you are here. You matter, even if you do not see it yet." Alara looked down, unsure what to say. The words made her chest ache, both from relief and confusion. No one had ever told her she mattered. No one had ever noticed her in this way. Over the following days, she began to learn more about Kaelin. He did not speak of his past often, but fragments emerged. He had been king of a kingdom long ago, betrayed by those he trusted most. The curse of the wolves had come as punishment and protection at the same time, binding him to the forest and giving him power he could never fully control. Yet beneath the fearsome exterior, there was a man who longed for something simple: connection, loyalty, someone to trust. Alara found herself thinking of him constantly. She noticed how he moved, how he spoke, the way his presence could fill a room without a word. She feared him, yes, but she also felt a strange pull, a curiosity she could not resist. And sometimes, late at night, she wondered if he felt it too. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Kaelin appeared in the kitchen while she was preparing dinner. He did not speak immediately. He watched her quietly, his eyes scanning her movements with an intensity that made her hands tremble. "You have learned quickly," he said at last. "The pack respects you, and I trust you more than I have trusted anyone in centuries."
Elara's cheeks warmed.
I am just trying to help, that is all.
Kaelin's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "And yet, that is enough. More than enough." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The crackling fire in the hearth was the only sound. Elara felt her heart beating rapidly, unsure of what to say. She wanted to ask him about his past, about the curse, about the loneliness she sensed beneath his strength, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, Kaelin turned and left, his form disappearing into the shadows. Elara exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and longing. She did not understand her feelings fully, but she knew that something had shifted between them, something fragile, dangerous, and beautiful. That night, as she lay in her small room, she could not sleep. She thought of Kaelin, of the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he watched her. She wondered if he was lonely, if he had anyone to trust, if he had ever cared for anyone, as she had begun to care for him. The snow outside continued to fall, covering the fortress in white silence. And somewhere in the forest, unseen and waiting, was a danger that neither of them yet understood. A shadow of the past that would test their courage, their trust, and the growing bond between them. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire linger in her memory, and whispered to herself, "Maybe I can belong here. Maybe I can matter." And somewhere in the fortress, Kaelin thought the same thing about her, a thought he would never speak aloud, but one that rooted itself deep in his heart. The forest waited, silent and watchful, as night fell. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets and promises that only the brave or the foolish would ever hear. And for the first time in a long time, Elara felt hope. The first snowstorm of the season had settled over the fortress. Thick layers of snow pressed against the walls, and the trees outside bent under its weight. Inside, the hearths burned warmly, and the wolves rested near the fires, their fur bristling slightly whenever the wind outside howled through the cracks in the stone. Elara moved quietly through the halls, her hands clasped in front of her. She carried a tray of tea for Kaelin, hoping the warmth of it might reach him in ways her words could not. He had been distant lately, walking the halls with a heavy expression and speaking less than usual. She had tried to ask, but every time she opened her mouth, he had silenced her with a look, a sharp, commanding glance that left her words caught in her throat. She found him in the highest tower, looking out over the snow-covered forest. The moonlight reflected off the snow, bathing the room in a pale silver glow. His back was straight, his jaw tight, and the quiet strength he always carried seemed heavier tonight.
Elara!
He said, not turning around. His voice was soft but carried weight. "Bring it here." She stepped closer and set the tray on the small table beside him. He poured the tea without speaking and handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, a spark passed between them. Alara's heart raced, but she forced herself to keep calm. "Kaelin, is something wrong?" she asked softly. He finally turned, his eyes dark and unreadable. "The forest?" he said, his voice low.
Something is stirring. A curse, long buried, returning.
Elara's stomach tightened. "A curse?" she echoed. He nodded. "Centuries ago, my enemies cursed this land, seeking to destroy me and my kingdom. I thought it contained, that it would fade with time. But it is awakening again." She looked out the window at the snow-laden forest. What does it want? Power.
Revenge. Destruction.
he said simply. It will test everything here. The pack, this fortress, and you. Elara's heart skipped. The thought of being endangered frightened her, but it also stirred something deeper. She had survived before, yes, but now she was part of something bigger. She was part of this strange, dangerous world that Kalen ruled, and despite the fear, she wanted to stand beside him. Then I will help, she said firmly. I want to help. I can cook, yes, but I can do more. I can learn. Kalen studied her for a long moment. You are brave, he said. Bravery does not always mean fighting with swords. Gore. Sometimes it is standing where you are needed, even when the world is against you. Her cheeks warmed. She had never been called brave, not by anyone, not even herself. That night the wind outside howled, and the wolves were restless. Elara stayed in the kitchen preparing food for the pack. She noticed small signs of tension, a growl here, a flick of a tail there. Something was in the air, something that made even Kalen uneasy. The next morning the storm worsened, snow drifted high against the walls, and the forest outside was hidden behind a wall of white. Kalen moved silently through the halls, checking on the pack, ensuring everyone was safe.
He did not speak much, but his presence was enough to calm the wolves.
Elara worked beside him, preparing a meal for the pack. She moved with care, watching him closely. She wanted to understand him, to learn his moods and his silences. It was strange, this feeling. Fear mixed with fascination. Awe mixed with a strange tenderness. Suddenly, the doors of the kitchen burst open. A cold wind swept in, and snowflakes tumbled across the floor. A shadow moved in the doorway, dark and twisting. The wolves growled, bristling. Elara froze, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Kalen was there in an instant, moving between her and the shadow. His eyes glowed faintly, and his stance was both human and wolf. The shadow shifted closer, and Elara realized it was not a person. Not fully. It was the curse, taking form, testing them. You will not harm them, Kalen said, his voice low and steady but full of authority. The shadow advanced. Kalen moved like a shadow himself, fluid and precise, blocking its path. The wolves joined him, their forms shifting in the dim light. Elara watched in awe. She had seen him fight before, but this was different. This was not just strength. It was command, control, and understanding of powers that terrified even her imagination. The shadow swirled, its shape shifting between smoke and mist, then solidifying into forms that mimicked the pack. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Do not falter, he warned. The curse will try to trick you, to prey on fear. Stand together. Elara's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. She realized then that her fear was natural, but it could not control her. She was part of this fortress, part of this pack, part of the strange world Kalen ruled. The shadow lunged. Kalen met it with power, his claws striking with precision, his strength enough to drive it back. The wolves attacked together, a chorus of growls and movement that pushed the curse toward retreat. But it was not defeated, only testing them, probing their strength, their courage, their trust. Elara realized something then. The curse was not only after them. It was after Kalen, after the fortress, after her place in it, and it would not stop until it found weakness. Later, when the shadow had retreated into the snow and the forest was quiet again, Kalen approached her. His expression was softer now, though his eyes were still dark with intensity. You stood, he said.
You did not run. That is bravery. Elara's cheeks burned.
I was scared, she admitted. He nodded. Fear is natural. It is not weakness. What matters is what you do with it. They sat together in the kitchen, the fire crackling, silence stretching comfortably between them. Elara felt a warmth she had not expected, not from the fire, but from simply being near him. She wanted to ask about his past, about the curse, about the loneliness she sensed behind his eyes, but the words caught in her throat. Kalen seemed to sense it. He reached out, briefly brushing her hand. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly. "And perhaps you are not as alone as you feel." Elara's heart thumped, and she looked away, pretending to busy herself with the dishes. But she felt it, a bond forming, fragile and dangerous, yet undeniable. Days turned into weeks. Elara trained quietly, learning to move with confidence, learning the patterns of the fortress, and learning to recognize the subtle signs of the curse's return. She and Kalen began to speak more openly, sharing small details of their pasts, their fears, their hopes. She learned that Kalen had been betrayed by those he trusted most, cursed by a rival king who envied his power. The wolves were not only guardians but companions, bonded to him by loyalty and magic, and beneath his strength and fearsome reputation, there was a man who longed for trust, for connection, for someone who could see him for who he truly was. Elara, in turn, shared her own story, though not all of it. She told him of the kingdom that had rejected her, of the life she had left behind, of the skills she had learned to survive. She did not speak of shame or regret, but Kalen sensed it anyway, and he did not judge. He only listened, and in listening, he gave her the gift of being seen. One night the wind was particularly fierce, and the fortress shivered under its force. Kalen had been patrolling, and Elara had stayed in the kitchen preparing a meal for the pack. She paused as she heard footsteps behind her. He appeared, wet from the snow, his hair clinging to his face.
"You should not have been out," she said softly, worry lacing her voice. "And you should not have been here alone," he replied, his tone almost teasing, though there was concern beneath it. They stood in silence, the warmth of the kitchen contrasting with the cold that clung to him. Elara felt her heart beating faster, an awareness of him so strong it made her hands tremble. Kalen moved closer, his eyes searching hers. "You are not safe alone, Elara," he said quietly. "But perhaps it is not only danger that finds us. Perhaps we find each other." Elara swallowed, feeling her chest tighten. She did not know what to say. She could feel the truth in his words, the bond forming between them. A connection that was fragile, dangerous, yet deeply comforting. The next morning, Kalen summoned the pack. The curse had grown stronger, and he knew it would not remain distant for long. They trained, moved, and prepared. Elara helped where she could, her courage tested in ways she had never imagined. The wolves respected her now, not just as a cook, but as someone who stood beside them, who faced fear with determination. That night, as the moon rose high and the snow glimmered silver outside, Kalen and Elara stood at the highest tower. The fortress below them was quiet, but the forest beyond was restless. "We are not safe yet," Kalen said. "But together, we might survive."
Elara looked up at him, a mixture of fear and longing in her eyes.
"I will stay."
"I will face it with you." He reached out, brushing her hair gently from her face. "Then we are stronger than the curse," he said softly. And in the shadows of the snow-covered forest, unseen but waiting, the curse watched. It would not stop. It would test them further, challenge their courage, and threaten everything they had built. But for the first time, Kalen and Elara stood together, a king and his unexpected companion, bound not by power alone, but by trust, courage, and the first fragile stirrings of something deeper. The night held its breath, waiting for the storm to come. But within the fortress, firelight flickered, hearts beat strongly, and the bond between them grew, fragile, yet unbroken. The fortress had never felt so silent. The snowstorm had passed, leaving the world outside blanketed in white. But inside, tension simmered like fire beneath the stone walls. The wolves moved restlessly, ears twitching, eyes alert. The curse that Kaelin had warned of had grown stronger, its presence a shadow pressing against every corner of the fortress. Elara moved quietly through the halls, her hands trembling slightly as she carried a tray of food to the pack. Her heart was heavy, not from fear alone, but from the awareness that the danger now reached its peak. Kaelin had called the pack together earlier, and she had seen the lines of worry etched into his face, the first cracks of vulnerability he had ever shown her. She found him in the great hall, standing before the windows, looking out at the forest beyond. The moonlight reflected off the snow, casting a silver glow that made his figure both regal and terrifying.
"You're awake early," she said softly, setting the tray on the table.
Kaelin turned, his eyes dark and unreadable. "The forest does not sleep," he said simply, "and neither can I. The curse approaches. Soon, it will test us directly." Elara's stomach tightened. She had faced shadows before, but this was different. This was not a test of strength alone. It was a test of heart, of trust, of everything she had learned since arriving at the fortress.
"I'm ready," she said firmly. "I will face it with you."
Kaelin studied her for a long moment, then nodded.
"Very well," he said. "But know this. The curse will prey on fear, on doubt, on weakness. You must be stronger than the shadows it creates. Together, we may survive. Alone, we will not." Night fell quickly, the sky darkening with storm clouds once again. The pack gathered in the courtyard, their forms shifting between human and wolf, a chorus of power and presence. Kaelin stood at the center, commanding attention without a word. Elara stood beside him, her small form dwarfed by his, but her resolve firm. The first signs of the curse appeared as a cold wind that swept through the courtyard, carrying whispers that twisted in the ears of the pack. Shadows moved unnaturally along the snow, forming shapes that mimicked wolves and humans alike. The wolves growled, circling protectively around Kaelin and Elara. The curse spoke without words, its voice a chorus of fears and regrets. "You cannot protect her. She will fail. He will fail. All will fall." Elara's stomach twisted, but she drew a deep breath and stood taller. She reached for Kaelin's hand. He took it, firm and steady, grounding her. "Do not listen," he said, his voice strong. "It lies. It wants you to falter. Trust in what you know, in each other." The shadows lunged, taking the forms of twisted creatures, reflections of the pack's fears. Kaelin moved first, his form shifting into the wolf, sleek and powerful, commanding the pack with authority and precision. They fought as one, a wave of strength and loyalty that pushed the curse back, but it was clever, splitting into smaller forms, testing every weakness. Elara realized what she could do. She could not fight with claws or strength, but she could use her mind, her courage, and her knowledge of the fortress and the pack. She called out directions, guiding the wolves to block the shadows, to move together in unity. Each word she spoke carried confidence, her fear tempered by determination. Kaelin glanced at her, eyes narrowing in surprise and pride. "Good," he said through gritted teeth. "You are more than you think." The shadows howled in frustration, splitting further, attempting to reach Kaelin and Elara separately. Kaelin turned, shifting back to human form, and strode toward the nearest shadow. His fists struck with power, but the curse twisted, slipping from his grasp. Elara saw the strain on him, the weight of centuries of pain and regret pressing against his every move. Without thinking, she stepped forward. She whispered words she did not know if she truly believed, but they carried power in the moment. "You will not take us. You cannot break what we have built. Together, We are strong. The shadows paused, twisting, confused. Kaelin turned, eyes meeting hers, and in that instant they understood each other. That their trust, their courage, their bond was stronger than fear. Together, they moved. Kaelin shifted into his wolf form, moving with unmatched speed and strength. Alara guided the pack, her voice calm, clear, and commanding despite her racing heart. The curse shrieked, twisting into monstrous forms, but the pack held, united, their loyalty and courage breaking the spell's hold. Then, with a final effort, Kaelin leapt, striking the heart of the shadow. The darkness shuddered and cracked, dissolving into mist that scattered into the night. Silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by the heavy breaths of the wolves and the pounding of hearts. Alara sank to the ground, trembling from exhaustion. Kaelin shifted back to human form beside her, his hand reaching for hers. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it. Together." I never thought I could."
He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "You were stronger than you knew."
You are more than worth, more than you believe.
For the first time, Alara allowed herself to believe it. She looked at him, seeing not just the king, not just the werewolf, but a man who had been broken by the world, and yet had found a way to trust again. They returned to the fortress, the pack following, weary but triumphant. Inside, the warmth of the hearth was a welcome contrast to the frozen night outside. Alara moved to feed the pack, but Kaelin stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "Rest," he said. "You have earned it." She nodded, sitting by the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. Kaelin sat beside her, his presence a calm strength. They did not speak for long, simply feeling the relief, the warmth, the bond that had formed through shared danger. Days passed, and the fortress slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The curse had been broken, for now. But both Kaelin and Alara knew it could return. Yet the bond they had formed, the trust and courage they had discovered in each other, could withstand anything the forest might send their way. One evening, as the moon rose high, Alara found herself in the highest tower with Kaelin. The forest stretched endlessly below, silver and quiet under the moonlight. "You could leave," Kaelin said softly, almost a whisper. "You do not have to stay here. You have survived the world outside. You could go back." Alara shook her head, her gaze steady. "I could, but I do not want to. Not anymore. I belong here, with you. With the pack. This is where I am needed, and where I am safe." Kaelin's eyes softened, and for a moment he looked less like a king and more like a man who had been waiting centuries for this moment. "Then we are both lucky," he said quietly. Alara smiled faintly, her heart swelling. "Ooh. Yes," she said. "Lucky." The night held promises, whispered not by wind or shadow, but by courage, trust, and love. Kaelin reached out, brushing her hair from her face, a gentle gesture that spoke of care, respect, and something more fragile, something they would build together, day by day. Alara leaned into him slightly, feeling the warmth of his presence. For the first time in her life, she believed in belonging, in being seen, in being valued, not for what she could do alone, but for who she was, and for what they could become together. The wolves lay near the fires, the fortress calm, and the moonlight spilled through the windows like silver hope. The curse had tested them, threatened them, and tried to break them, but it had failed, for the bond between them was stronger than any shadow. Kaelin spoke softly, words meant only for her. "You survived me, and now I will survive with you." Alara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "And I will survive with you, always." The forest outside whispered, but it no longer carried fear. It carried respect for courage, for love, for trust. And in the fortress, the king and his companion, the pack and its guardians, had found something precious: redemption, hope, and the first light of a new beginning. The night stretched on, quiet, eternal, and full of possibility. And somewhere in the shadows, the forest waited, knowing that its darkness could never erase the bond forged in courage, trust, and love. The fortress, the wolves, and the two who had survived so much together stood ready for whatever the future might hold, together, unbroken, and stronger than ever before.